In the latest on his administration's efforts to fight climate change, President Joe Biden wrote in a statement yesterday that my administration is canceling all remaining oil and gas leases issued under the last administration in the Arctic refuge and proposing to protect 13 million acres in the Western Arctic. There's more to do, but we're taking action to meet the moment for the future generations.
While Joe Biden touted these climate initiatives, former President Donald Trump wrote, Joe Biden's electric vehicle mandate will murder the U.S. auto industry and kill countless union auto worker jobs forever. There is no such thing as a fair transition to the destruction of these workers' livelihoods and the obliteration of this cherished American industry. The Biden administration announced last week that it intends to invest in American auto manufacturing jobs to help workers keep their jobs, quote, as the car industry transforms for future generations. We can't forget when Joe Biden drove cars at the Detroit Auto Show last year and announced $7.5 billion for electric vehicle charging stations.
I signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act. It gives tax credits to new electric vehicles, fuel cell vehicles, made in America. And for the first time, you get a tax credit if you buy a used electric vehicle. That's all coming. And part of the infrastructure law, we're investing $7.5 billion to build electric vehicle charging stations all across America. Jump in, I'll give you a ride to Washington.
Electric vehicles are increasingly becoming a rental car option. Many drivers have reportedly weird feelings when driving them. One user said that the battery drained quickly, and she added, I don't plan for random stops in weird places. And another said that just getting out of the garage, it felt like I was learning to drive all over again, according to the Wall Street Journal. Well,
have you ever driven an electric car?
I have not.
I haven't either, actually.
My automobile is half, but that wasn't intentional.
A hybrid?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. But that wasn't for anything other than I liked the car. I'm not somebody who will drive or not drive cars as a result of electronic.
Fair enough. I'm very pro gas car. I have a lot of issues with the big EV push. I don't fault anybody who wants to drive one.
Yeah. But
clearly our power grid is not ready for this. We definitely don't have enough charging stations. I actually really sympathize with that woman in the Wall Street Journal article because I used to live in Crystal City in Arlington, and that was one of the hot spots for the rise in carjackings during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And the only gas station within a few mile radius was this Exxon that was right off of Route 1. Mm-hmm. And that was the spot where the carjackers would go because they could immediately get on the highway and get out of state where it would be harder to catch them. So I had to drive so far out of my way to go to what I considered a safe gas station. So the idea that I would be driving an electric vehicle on a road trip and have to go to some sketchy place just because it had an electric charger would make me so nervous.
Well, so I guess how I feel about it is if it's creating jobs, if it's incentivizing job creators to kind of forge this blue-green alliance where you have labor and sort of the environmental community working together to create more American jobs, I think it's fine. And the way our administration, President Biden's administration did it through the IRA was to add incentives if you were to buy American electric vehicles and American used rental vehicle, used EVs. Mm-hmm. So as long as they were American made, people can basically get a tax credit. And I find that's incentivizing. I think that's a good thing. It's also, I think younger generations are very activated by this issue, I think, on both sides. I can't say it's a huge passion of mine that I get politically activated about myself. However, it is, I think, an issue that resonates very much with young people, especially on the Democratic side. So I think it's good for Biden politically to keep pushing things, the incentives he was pushing, like in the IRA for EVs. And look, it keeps labor relevant because They're an essential constituency of the Democratic Party. And as we transform as a country, as technology advances, labor, will start to get squeezed out. And I think this is a good way to say, look, climate change and green jobs are labor jobs.
I appreciate the fact that Biden did include that Made in America stipulation. I'm very much pro keeping manufacturing in the U.S. and reshoring a lot of our supply chains. We saw
It's very Trumpian.
Well,
America first, right?
I'm America first. We saw the drastic consequences of not having our supply chains in America when we couldn't get PPE during the pandemic, and in the aftermath of the pandemic, basic goods were caught up in these shipping containers off of the coast. But I would say that I don't think the EV industry is the best one to keep these manufacturing jobs and these auto worker jobs. I think Biden's massive spending and his massive payoffs to the union industry are basically an admission that this EV push will cost more jobs than it creates. Otherwise, he wouldn't be having to spend billions of dollars in order to help protect these jobs. And it was even a huge sticking point for the United Auto Workers Union that they didn't necessarily want to support Biden because of his insistence on pushing these electric vehicle subsidies and mandates.
And that, yes, to an extent, they were very much in support of their own Congressman, Dan Kildee from Michigan. They were very much in support of that House bill version of the EV legislation, and those tax incentives did make it into the IRA. They were not a fan of sort of the Senate version, which adopted Senator Manchin's changes. But I will say that Biden has been an equal opportunity offender here. I mean, he has, in his first year alone, he approved more drilling leases than Donald Trump did in his first year. And he approved the Conoco pipeline project, which was a multi-billion-dollar project. I think he's been pretty pragmatic when it comes to environmental legislation and really straddling the divide there. But I don't know. Tell me how you feel about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to this idea about, protecting union jobs, these electric vehicles require 30% fewer workers to manufacture as a gas-powered vehicle. So that's an inherent problem with this as well. And even when you spend tons of money trying to basically transfer workers to new industries or new skill sets, there's necessarily going to be a gap in workers that get left behind.
Sure.
I mean, we see this in the fossil fuel industry as well. And one of my other big problems with the EV push is that these electric vehicles don't really seem to have a huge positive effect on the environment. A lot of them emit just as much CO2 as a gas-powered vehicle, and that's primarily due to the mining of the materials it takes to create these batteries, right? The mining that's going on in incredibly dirty industries in Africa. A lot of those mines are controlled by China, so there's the national security issue inherent in this. And then the fact that we saw this video from, I believe it was the CEO of GM, and she was asked, how these electric vehicle chargers are actually powered, and it turns out the chargers themselves are powered by fossil fuels. So this is not, a magical solution to the climate.
Sure.
And so to dump billions of dollars into that industry and say, I'm fixing climate change, I don't think a very good plan.
It is part of a larger discussion about how, and it goes back to sort of the free trade argument, right? With NAFTA, CAFTA, the Pacific Rim deal.
The TPP.
The TPP. That President Obama and Paul Ryan worked together to pass TPA. It was bringing together a coalition of what the Republican Party used to be, which was about free trade and progress and opening up markets to business and competing against China. And it's interesting to see how Democrats are evolving to more, I would say, free, like as Obama did as president, more free trade party, and Republicans are sort of reversing themselves in a lot of ways.
Becoming more protectionist.
Yeah.
And I think there was a recognition that a lot of those free trade principles, particularly opening up trade with China, didn't democratize China. It just gave them a ton of economic power while still remaining this very oppressive country in terms of human rights.
But it allowed us to compete in the region, to rein some of their power in. It's better that we're there than not being there.
I don't know. At this point, with how much China has gained in terms of geopolitical power, I'm not sure I buy that, but I hear your arguments. Point well taken. More rising after.
Maybe Ivanka should get her dresses from somewhere else then.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like buying products in China either. We'll be back with more rising after this.